Welcome to Yachting International Radio's first online forum. I am thrilled to have you all join us for the second day of this groundbreaking event streaming live on social media and available on demand for those who registered. Yesterday and today, we'll be diving into some of the most pressing mental health topics in yachting. Our esteemed panel of accredited professionals who are already making waves with their podcasts, courses, and other projects on these subjects will lead us through insightful discussions. You'll have the opportunity to gain practical insights and engage in meaningful conversations that can truly make a difference in your life and career. Here are a quick overview of today's sessions. We will start with Dr. Edith Shiro on trauma and relationships on board. We will continue with Laura Kilbey and Gary Napier on sobriety and culture on board, moderated by Holly Overton. Following that, we will have a discussion on how to pick a therapist with Dr. Edith Shiro and Gary Napier, moderated by Holly Overton. Then we will head into a wellness session with Chef Danny Davies. We will finish the day with a preview of Experiential Yachting's meditation sounds. If you have any questions, please send them in as comments on whatever social media platform you're tuning in from, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can while allowing our speakers to cover the insights they have prepared for you. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Edith Shiro. I am so excited for you guys to get to meet Dr. Edith Shiro and just enjoy all her insights. You're going to learn a lot. So I'm just going to leave her here, and thank you so much for joining us.
Andrea, thank you so much for this invitation and to be able to talk to the community of yachting and the boating community. So very happy to be talking today about some of the struggles and the traumas that are related to the mental health in the community of people in boats or in yachts, and what happens. As a clinical psychologist, I've had some experience in working with this population living in Miami. We have a lot of people from cruise that are coming in and that are requesting therapy sometimes. So I've had some of that experience. And one of the things that I notice is that there are certain issues that have to do with mental health that are very particular and unique to the yachting community and to the crew, the passengers, and even the people that are working on board. And some of it has to do with the very, very particular circumstances in which people are surrounded when they are working in such an environment. Why? There are very specific things that happen working on boats. One of the things that really stands out is the isolation. And what do I mean by that? I mean that a lot of the times people that are working on the boat are very much distance from their regular support systems and family, friends, people on land. So you find yourself in the middle of the ocean, sometimes with no emotional support, no psychological support. And sometimes it's not an issue at all, but there are times in which that would really play a big important role. Another issue that comes up a lot has to do with cultural diversity. You are coexisting and living together in the same environment for a long period of time, not just one day or 1 week, but sometimes it's many weeks, many months, with a group of people that are very, very diverse, meaning like they have very different cultural backgrounds, habits, routines, belief systems, and there's really a demand to coexist, to tolerate, to live together in a closed up environment that sometimes it might be challenging. Sometimes it's hard to sleep together, eat together, work together, have fun together with people that might be people that you don't know. And a third thing that happens usually in this kind of very particular and unique communities is that there's no boundaries and no breaks between work and personal time, or environments in which you can distinguish between when you're working or when you're having fun, when you're being social, when you're being personal, when you want to be with family, when you want to be with friends, or when you're on call when you're working. Usually these are long hours, but from my understanding is that people work for many hours, sometimes more than 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And the break between working and personal time is blurry sometimes. So these are things that definitely affect our mental health. These are things that definitely take a toll on how we have a balanced life, an everyday harmonic life in which you can, pay attention to work and pay attention to your personal needs. A lot of the times, my understanding is that keeping a routine, a healthy routine, is not so easy. For example, being able to exercise every day, sleep enough hours, eat healthy and properly at the required times, do some things that are good for your soul and for your psyche in terms of reading and having a hobby, playing music, dancing. It might not go together with the routine or the demands of being on board. So these are things that are really take a toll on the well-being of the community and the people that are working on board. These are that, and I'm saying this and I'm mentioning this because they're not, it's not that it's just doesn't happen anywhere else, but in the environment of being in the yacht or being on board or being in a seafarer, these are very, very particular circumstances. And all of this influence and affect the well-being of the person. I find also that some of the times people are very excited to work on board, to be part of the yachting community without really realizing what it means. Sometimes people have like the very distorted idea of like, oh, it's all fun and games and in the ocean and being on a cruise or being on a yacht. It's so much fun without really realizing that it requires certain things from the person. For example, being stable emotionally, having enough of a regulatory system inside where you can moderate and regulate your emotions, knowing that there are going to be outside demands in terms of like how much you work, how much you sleep, how much you interact with other people. It's not sometimes you don't have time for yourself. There's not enough time for space, for personal space. So these are things that sometimes people ignore, and when they find themselves in the middle of a situation, they might not have the tools or the resources to deal with it. So part of my conversation here is to really highlight and emphasize some of these things and how this can be triggering for trauma, from past trauma, for other personal experiences, and how we develop the tools in the emotional resources to deal with this.
When you are coexisting as a group, and it doesn't matter if you're you're the leader of the community, you're the staff, you have coworkers or your passengers, and you're coexisting and relating within one environment for many days or many weeks or many months, things happen, right? Everybody brings their own agenda, their own baggage, their own understanding of life. And the difficulty with that is that there's no breaks and there's no going out or moving away or moving out or keeping distance sometimes because of because of the situation. So if we are, I'm going to give you an example. If a person that has been working in a boat feels like their boss or the person above them is not treating them well, or is sexually harassing them, or is being inappropriate sexually or emotionally, where do they go? What do they do? What are the alternatives? What kind of things can happen? A lot of the times there's not a structure in place that can determine, there's a committee or a department or a group of people that are in charge of dealing with it. Sometimes it doesn't happen on board. Sometimes the consequences of reporting a situation like that can be very, very big. And sometimes people can lose their jobs or get fired or not be believed or being treated badly if they were to talk about it or report it. And then, I mean, this happens also in land. But the fact that it's isolated, the environment is isolated on boat, makes it, I think, a little more difficult, and that increases the intensity of the situation. Another thing that happens is that sometimes people come into working on boats and yachts thinking that this is a fun thing, then they're going to be traveling, seeing new places, it's partying and it's fun, and probably a lot of that is true too. But they might not be prepared for what it's like to be coexisting with a group of people on and off, day in and day out, isolated from the rest of the world in some ways, in the middle of the ocean. And that requires mental health preparation. That requires psychological preparation. In my experience, people that have had certain understanding and processing their own issues have an easier time when faced with difficulty, with adversity, with challenges, than people that are disconnected or disassociated or unaware of their own issues when coming into a situation like this. So it can happen that levels of anxiety might raise, levels of depression might increase. People might feel more unsupported. People feel more without having their everyday tools or resources to support themselves emotionally. They might have emotional dysregulation, and they might not have the people, places, things to be able to take care of themselves. So being aware and becoming aware of these issues is extremely important. Another issue that happens is also, how is it for a person that is working on the boat, on sea, able to tolerate, to accept, and to coexist with other crew members or passengers that are very, very, very different in terms of cultural beliefs, in terms of habits, everyday habits, in terms of food, smell, way of talking, way of relating, way of dressing. All these variables can sometimes affect the person's everyday life, for which they are not even aware that this can happen. And it can trigger certain memories or experiences or behaviors that can make the person feel more anxious, or that can make the person feel more depressed. And that there's not, like, there might not be a support system in place to allow for people to take care of these issues. One of the things that I think is absolutely necessary is to pay attention to our own needs, our own history of trauma, our own triggers and activations. So we know when one of these things happen, that we can identify it, we can put a name to it, and we can say, right now, what the other person is doing to me, or what the other person is saying, or how the other person is behaving, is triggering a response in me that reminds me of a time when I wasn't feeling good, or it reminds me of something that made me feel sad or uncomfortable or fear, afraid, right? So all these things are things that can happen on board. And if we don't have the support system, we don't have the resources, it can escalate and become something bigger. One of the things that I talk about when I talk about trauma is that it's not just the event that happens for the person. It's not like, okay, I'm being sexually abused or harassed, or I'm being treated badly, I'm being bullied. I feel like I can't talk to my friends because I have there's no internet, or maybe there's no connection and I'm isolated in the middle of the ocean. All these things, if we don't really pay attention to it, can develop into very, very, very uncomfortable feelings. And what do we do with uncomfortable feelings? Usually, and this is very general, we as human beings don't like to feel pain, don't like to feel suffering. And we develop mechanisms of dealing with pain and suffering. So every one of us has installed in our bodies a nervous system that knows how to react and how to respond to pain, to discomfort, and not just physical pain and discomfort, but emotional and psychological pain and discomfort. So this is what we call trauma responses. If something happens to us in which we're being rejected, we're being abandoned, we're being isolated, we're being bullied, we're being disrespected, in which we are maybe being threatened in some way. These are just examples of some things that can happen. We develop through our bodies and through our nervous system responses to defend ourselves, to survive in situations that are difficult. When the environment that we live in, and this happens on boats a lot, the level of noise, the level of maybe the environmental issues that might be dangerous or that might be unpredictable are present when we're surrounded with people that maybe we don't know or we don't really understand so well, or that we don't trust. All the situations can trigger and can augment, can increase our level of discomfort. What we do, we develop ways of defending ourselves against that. So this is the classical response that I'm sure most of you have heard of: fight, flight, or freeze. This is very important that we do that, because in our responses of fight, flight, or freeze, we are protecting ourselves, we are defending ourselves from pain and from suffering and from the dangers that are coming in. And it makes us survive, right? So this is all good and fine. The problem is that when we keep having these trauma responses, these survival mechanisms ongoing. So imagine being on boat, imagine being with your crew, imagine being with your community, but because you've been feeling a danger or discomfort or in pain, the way that you're reacting with everyone around you is through fighting, through fleeing, or through freezing. And it goes on and on and on and on, even when the discomfort stops, even when the danger is over. And that's when we develop trauma. So it's not so much the event itself, but what we do with it and the way that it affects our relationships every day. So usually when that happens, the first thing that happens is that we feel fragmented, we feel isolated, we feel disconnected. There's a lot of shame that happens. If I am every day waking up and working with the same people and I have nowhere to go, and I am in this container for many, many weeks, what do I do with the things that I'm feeling inside? Do I share it with somebody else? Maybe I'm going to be judged. Maybe I'm going to be criticized. Maybe I'm going to be rejected. Maybe I'm going to be fired. Maybe I'm going to have even bigger consequences. Or do I trust anybody with this? So sometimes that makes us even more isolated. It makes us disconnect from the rest of people. So we're walking around feeling all these things and having to interact and to function with everyone else. And then that creates very, very difficult consequences. So we're feeling ashamed of ourselves. We're feeling depressed. We're feeling sad. We're feeling anxious. And what do we do with that? So in the boating community, I know that a lot of the times the resources that are used for coping mechanisms is drugs and alcohol and addictive behavior. By the way, this happens inland too. That happens off the boat as well. And it's a very, very, very common response to trauma and a very common response to pain and suffering. So we develop, all of us have some sort of addictive behavior, some sort of behavior that pushes the pain away. People, let me know if this sounds familiar to you. People, we tend to dissociate, disconnect from our feelings. We tend to get irritated. We fight with everyone around us. We tend to want to sleep more. And so we feel tired and sleepy all day long. We tend to feel paralyzed and say, oh, I don't know where to go, what to do, how to make decisions. We maybe might have a tendency to have repetitive behaviors over and over and over, doing the same thing. We become obsessed about irrelevant situations. we tend to do addictive behavior like drinking a lot of alcohol, using different kinds of drugs, sexual addictions, shopping, gambling, eating, feeding, food, binge eating, or not eating at all. These are all behaviors that are ways in which we unconsciously, of course, this is not done on purpose, unconsciously use to deal with pain. The way that we avoid feeling pain and feeling uncomfortable with ourselves and with the world is by numbing sometimes, by dissociating, by disconnecting, by pushing feelings away. And this is typical what happens. And why I'm putting such an emphasis here, because sometimes these addictions seem to be the only resource that we have when we're living at sea on a boat with a whole group of people and we have nowhere to go. So we have nothing left except numbing ourselves, disconnecting ourselves, or doing something so we don't feel and we're not in touch with reality. I want to tell you that even though these are very, very common responses and very common behaviors, there is an alternative. Because if we keep living in the trauma world, if we keep living with trauma responses, this is not just going to affect our life on boat and our life when working, it's going to affect also our lives with our families, with our loved ones, when we're on land and when we are doing other things as well. So it's very, very, very important that we really take care of our emotional and psychological well-being. This is like going to the gym in the same way that we should have exercises and routines. We should have exercises and routines for our mental health. So having a really, really good routine of meditation, even if you don't know how to meditate, taking 5 minutes with yourself to breathe, to stay silent, to find a place that makes you feel safe and good in the boat is very important. Having a routine of doing exercises for yourself, moving the body in a way that makes you feel good. Movement, not just moving because you're working, moving because you're allowing your body to take care of itself, is doing exercises, doing some sort of sport is important. Third, having some sort of hobby, some sort of outlet that is creative every day allows you to relax your nervous system, so you don't have to be on guard and constantly with an alarm set that that you're available for working 24/7. So having some hobby, for example, music, for example, art, for example, dancing, these are crucial things for us to incorporate in our lives so we can allow our bodies to feel safe, to feel more having a place for release, for disconnection from the stress and the everyday pressure, and listening to music, singing, playing an instrument, dancing, going for walks of leisure, maybe around the boat without having to talk to other people or take care of other people, doing some arts and crafts, doing some things with our hands are really, they seem little, but I'm telling you, these are very, very, very serious ways of taking care of ourselves. Another very important thing that I've learned lately, I was with this interesting psychologist called James Nestor. He wrote a book on breathing because of his own experiences of breath. And really breathing, I mean, a whole book on just how to breathe through your nose. And really that's how important it is that we learn how to breathe. Breathing in and breathing out and being mindful of it can change your life completely. It can change the way you sleep. It can change the way you eat. It can change the way your body functions. These are all very, very important elements to incorporate in our lives while we are on the boat, while we are working, while we are doing what we're doing within the community of the seafarers. And of course, that applies everywhere else, but especially true when we are under these conditions. So breathing mindfully, meditation, exercises for the mind and for the body, using creativity such as music, art, dancing. These are all elements that are fundamental for our well-being. One last one is being in touch with nature. People that work on boats have the beautiful advantage of being surrounded with nature, not just the ocean, but also when we are seeing other places where the boat stops, or when we can enjoy a sunset, a sunrise. All of that are really gifts that we can have to use for our well-being. So take the time while you're on the boat to really pay attention to the sunrise, to the sunset, to the waves in the ocean, to the color of the water, to maybe the islands or the landscapes that you have in front of you, and stay there for a moment to really take it in and to allow your body to be washed with beauty. I have a question here. I love questions. Please, 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 let me hear from you. How can I recognize if I'm allowing trauma to affect my daily lives? I love that question. This is from the Clever Traveler. Thank you so much for this question. And this is a question that people ask me a lot. How do I recognize that I have trauma? Because sometimes trauma doesn't have to be, oh, I'm a soldier and I'm coming from war, or my whole life has, my whole family has been killed, or, it doesn't have to be like that. Trauma can be very subtle. So when you find yourself overreacting to situations that seem very, very small, and your response is very, very disproportionate, that's an important sign of trauma. For example, if I come to you and tell you, hey, so how many days are you going to be working next week? And your response is, that's none of your business. Leave me alone. I have no time talking to you. Get away from me, for example. It's like, wow, the way that you're responding to my very simple question is so disproportionate that it's coming from someplace else. So maybe the topic of the schedule of working is so triggering that it's touching on something very traumatic. That's one way of identifying if you're having trauma. Another way is that when you are feeling that in your relationships every day, you are not fully present. In other ways, you are not trusting people. You are isolating yourself. You are really keeping a lot of distance because you're ashamed of something, because you're hiding things about you that are very basic, because you're not trusting that other people are going to be safe to be with, to talk to. I'm not saying everybody, but when you're feeling that about most people around you, that's another way of identifying there must be something going with you. When you are not able to be in touch with the way your body feels, when you feel like there's a disconnect, like there's a line that goes through your neck that says, whatever I'm thinking, I'm not feeling in my body. And whatever I'm feeling in my body, I can't identify what it is. When you don't know how you're feeling, if you're sad, if you're happy, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you're fearful, if you're surprised, if you're enjoying, if you have nostalgia, if you are elated, you can't put words into your feelings. That's another way of knowing that you might be experiencing trauma. Another way is that when you're not able to sleep well, when you're having nightmares, a lot of nightmares, and when you're having very discomfort during sleep, when you're not eating properly, when your everyday functions in your body are not there in a healthy way. That's another way that trauma manifests. And one last one is that when you develop pain in your body that is chronic. So you're having stomach aches every day, or you're having chest pains every day, or you're having headaches every day. These kind of things are manifestations of the trauma in our bodies. So what do we do with that? To do with that is that we stop, we pay attention, to what our bodies are saying to ourselves, we truly pay attention. We sit with that pain, with that discomfort, with that, and say, okay, what is this about? Why am I reacting the way I'm reacting? How come this is the response that I'm having with myself and with others? Because when you start to do that, even though it's scary, even though it's painful, we can begin to put words into it. Thank you so much. Andrea is asking, I have gone through some trauma and I worry it's affecting my relationship. Is there something I can do? Andrea, thank you so much for that question. When we go through trauma, even if it's small trauma and not or it can be big trauma, it always affects our relationships, not just with ourselves, but with others. And I love that you're asking what to do, because most people say, oh, well, I have trauma. There's nothing I can do. This is what I live with. This is my experience. This is what I can get, and I have nothing else. And I'm here to tell you that, yes, there are things you can do. And the first thing to do is to bring that traumatic experience from the background, from the back of your head, from the unconscious into the conscious, meaning bring it in, have it in front of you, identify it, put a name to it, and say, yes, this happened to me. For example, my parents got divorced, and now the way that I relate to my lover, to my partner, to my spouse is informed by the experiences I had with my parents, right? So this is, how do we not let the trauma of the divorce play into my relationship? What do? We name it, we identify it, and we say, I'm going to be mindful that I'm not going to repeat the same patterns and the same things to manifest into my new relationship. I'm saying, like, I don't know if there's more questions. I know that we started with some technical difficulties, but I think we're doing well now. I really, really would love to hear people. I would love to hear other questions, and would love to hear what you have to say. And this is, I know I said a lot of things for the short time that we have, but the most important of all is that we can constantly stay connected with ourselves in a very intentional, in a very conscious way. Because otherwise, the way that we go around in the world is that we keep spreading our problems, our traumas, our difficulties with others in other relationships. And, that's contagious. I always say trauma is contagious and healing is contagious. So if we're walking around, especially if we're a crew member at a boat and we are responsible for people around us, and we have not dealt with our own issues, with our own pain, our own traumas, our own anxieties, our own addictions, we keep connecting with other people through the trauma, through the addiction, through the discomfort, and it spreads. Because if I'm treating you badly, then you go and treat somebody else badly, and then it goes like that, and it's a chain. So the responsible thing to do, especially in this day and age in which there's so much need for peace, for tolerance, for acceptance, for understanding, is that we take responsibility of our own actions, of our own presence, how we show up in the world to deal with ourselves and with others. So my invitation really is to start identifying what are those addictive behaviors and anxieties and triggers that you are repeating and that you're carrying with you, so you can start healing them, so you can relate to others from a healthy place, from a trauma-free place, from a place of truth and authenticity, and not from a place of survival and rejection and disconnection. I have a question here, and thank you so much for these questions. I love them. Zoe Linder, do you have any recommendations for dealing with negative memories of previous trauma? Zoe, that's a great question. You know that we all carry memories, and especially when they're difficult and they're traumatic, it really interferes with our everyday lives. So not only the memories in our head, but the memories in our body. Our body keeps a score. My very good friend and colleague Bessel van der Kolk says this, and he has a whole book to explain it. The body keeps the score, meaning even if you don't remember what happened to you, your body remembers. And sometimes it surfaces during sleep, during an interaction, during something, a trigger, and you'll all of a sudden remember things that were negative. So Zoe, how do we deal with negative memories? We take the time and the space to invite them in, because memories, negative memories, keep coming up to be attended to. So when we don't pay attention to them, when we keep pushing them under the rug, they're going to keep showing up. The more that you resist, the more that it will persist, right? You know this saying, what resists persists. When the more we keep pushing and avoiding, the more it's going to come in. So the best thing to do is find a safe space, either with a therapist, with a friend, with a family member, and sit with that person and start talking about those negative memories so they can get processed, they can be aired, and they can be understood and accepted so you can move forward. Let me know if that helps. That's though, and I know Zoe, there was another question that I saw before Zoe, but Zoe, I hope this is helpful. I think there was one more question that I think I saw. But anyway, I can't wait to hear more of your feedback and more about what you have to say. And really, it takes time. This is not an easy thing to do. Please check out my book, The Unexpected Thief of Trauma. It has a lot of exercises, a lot of steps in how to heal trauma, how to go from pain to purpose, from breakdown to breakthrough, to go from the wound of the pain to wisdom. And you might get some answers there. And the invitation again is to open space for this kind of conversation, for this kind of observation, to live a life that is more conscious. One last question. How do you handle an unexpected negative memory or body reaction bubbling up in the immediate situation when it happens? And, thank you for that question. That's from Shatswen Shahsan. And the question is, sometimes in the moment, we get triggered. And that response, I think what you're saying, that response happens in the moment and it bubbles up. And there's nothing we can do in the moment because it comes from a place that we cannot control. And so in that unexpected moment, it's already happening. And I think what happens is that we get triggered and we get put in a place that takes us back into that negative memory. So the classic example that I'm going to give you is that if I'm a soldier of war, and I've lived in a horrible experience of war in which people around me have been killed, in which I've been listening to shotguns and to arms and to all kinds of things. And then the war finishes. I come home. And after a year, it's 4th of July and there are fireworks. The sound of the fireworks, even though I'm in a happy place in the moment, even though I'm doing well, the sound of the fireworks are going to trigger a negative memory or a body reaction that is bubbling up, like you're saying, and it's going to make me react in ways that are so disproportionate and so out of place because of the sound of the fireworks. So it's going to take me right back into war. So that's why the most important thing and the most responsible thing for us is to know and identify those negative memories, not when they're being triggered, but when we are at peace, when we are safe, and when we are able to look into them without being in the situation. So thank you so much for that question. I know this is a lot of information and a lot to do. It takes time, it takes process, it takes really dedicating ourselves to taking care of our mental health, of our healthy mental health. And my invitation is to do that. And there's so many ways to go about it. I'm going to be talking about how to find a good therapist later on today. So tune into that, stay tuned, and we're going to be talking to you again. Thank you so much for this invitation. Thank you, Andrea, and the whole crew for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Always learn so much from you when it comes to trauma. I have benefited a lot from the book as well. Like Edith said, she will be back later on with another session. But for right now, we're going to give you guys a 2-minute break to go stretch your legs. So this is your pause right now. Thank you, Edith.
Thank you.
Hi guys, so I'm back. I am so excited for you guys to learn a lot about our next discussion about sobriety and culture on board with Laura Kilbey and Gary Napier, monitored by Holly Overton. They will be on the studio in a second. Here we'll examine the culture of alcohol consumption in the yachting industry and its effects on crew members. This session will discuss the challenges of maintaining sobriety, provide support resources, and promote a healthier onboard culture.
Great. Well, hello. This is my first time meeting you both. So, hi.
Hi.
So my name is Holly. I'm the editor of Dock Walk, and I'll be moderating this panel and the next one. So thank you to Yachting International Radio for having us and for putting on this wellness forum. So this discussion is about sobriety and the drinking culture on board. It's something that we should talk more about, and to help guide us through this subject is Laura Kilbey, who's chief stewardess and founder of Sober Crew Social Club, which we'll get onto later, and Gary Napier, who is a psychologist, life coach, and founder of The Gap Counselling. Do you want to each kind of give us a little bit about your backgrounds and basically why you're here to talk to us today? Laura, do you want to start?
Hi. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I feel really privileged to be here. And I think it's such an important conversation. I have been in yachting forever. And so I started back in like the mid 2000s. So I really have been in yachting for a long time. And during that time, I've been both sober and a heavy drinker. And it was during a break from yachting when I decided to start the Sober Crew Social Club, just because having been sober in yachting, I know how isolating it is, how lonely it can be. And it was really, when I started it, a platform just to meet and connect with other sober yacht crew. And really, really quickly, sort of within a matter of a month, I had so many messages coming through, so many people saying, oh my God, I need this. Oh my God, you're sort of telling my story. And I realized just how big a need there was for these sort of conversations to happen in yachting. So yeah, it's just sort of taken off from there, really.
Yeah, that's super. We'll get back round to talking about that a little later in this conversation. Gary?
Hi, so my relationship with yachting is different. It's more from a social aspect, whereby I socialise a lot of the guys who work within the yachting industry through football or going out as friends. And 3 years ago now, but based in Mallorca, I realised that the drinking culture within yachting was beyond the norm. And bear in mind, I'm coming from a predominantly football background, so I'm familiar with how football and drink goes together. But I found that in terms of the quantity and the effect was beyond whatever we consider to be the norm. And then more recently, within the format of the professional context, seeing people with their struggles, explain it on a personal basis, whereby they're battling with alcohol, seeing it from the wife's perspective, the families, the consequences of the drink and how it's affected them and their homes. And subsequently, some have experienced breakups because of it. So I see, from a layman's point of view, in a social context, thinking, well, this is a bit too much. But then also from a personal perspective, when you're actually meeting families in the room or hearing their stories and saying how alcohol is destroying their lives. So
Laura, what's been your experience being on board of the drinking culture and alcohol consumption as crew?
Well, I think historically, wherever there's been water and boats, there's been booze. You used to get a rum ration in the Navy. It flows through like the veins of anything, yachties. It's just part and parcel of it. And there's always been this sort of work hard, play hard mentality. And it seems to be the go-to way to blow off steam. It's the way to cope with things. It's, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to grab a beer. It's ingrained in everything that yachting is. It's the not being able to drink for a week or two, so you've got guests on board, and then, oh my God, finally we can go for a drink and get absolutely smashed. It's just, yeah, deeply ingrained in the industry.
And how widespread is it? Is it going to be, you'll find it on a few boats or across the whole fleet?
There are a few boats that are dry boats, so that, let's say we take those exceptions out, I would say it's pretty widespread. There are more and more people coming into the industry now. Just if we look internationally, outside of yachting, more and more young people are drinking less. So as you get more people coming into yachting, I think there will perhaps be a slight shift as we sort of, some of the older crew leave and newer crew come through. But at the moment, as it stands, it's very much widespread. And there's a real narrative that if you don't drink, you are outside the norm. And it's a real sort of bone of contention where it's like, oh, this person's boring, we're going to stick them on watch. You become, that crew member then becomes or can become isolated.
And why do you think the culture exists? Do you think it's because they're in this pressure cooker? Is it peer pressure?
I think it's a really good question. I think there's no one answer to that. You're living in a thoroughly artificial environment. For starters, you're in a sort of Big Brother type situation where you live, eat, work, sleep, in all senses of the word, with your colleagues sometimes, and you are dealing with a heightened sense of existence almost. It's like the highs in yachting are super high, but the lows are really, really challenging. You've got guests on board maybe for a month, 6 weeks charter, and it's back-to-back days of really long hours. You don't get to go home, sit on your sofa, pat the dog and go and sleep in your own bed. You know, I've worked on boats where, I mean, this is going back a few years, but where we were hot bunking and things like that because there weren't enough crew on board. So I would sleep in my bed during the day, somebody during the night, somebody else would be sleeping in my bed during the day. I mean, these aren't realistic.
It's not normal.
It's not normal. And, you know, for a lot of people coming into the industry, especially now, you know, we're in a situation where people are staying at home longer than ever because people can't move out on their own. So people are sometimes coming straight from home into yachting, into this really intense sort of extreme environment, and they perhaps are thrown in at the deep end of suddenly having to deal with this sort of situation that they maybe don't have the tools to deal with. So then you have the stress, you have tiredness, you have loneliness and being away from family. And that's not just obviously for younger crew members, it's for people across the board. But if you don't know how to deal with that, it's really easy to turn to drink, especially when there is the peer pressure environment as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all been in sort of similar situations and similar environments, even ashore, where there's that pressure to drink. And sometimes it's fun, and then sometimes it's not, and it's about finding that balance. Gary, what do you think is what's your take on why this culture exists? I mean, on land and at sea.
In agreement with Laura, there very much is you're either in or you're out, and it's about social identity. Where do I identify myself with? And thinking particularly of men, because that's the people I work with most within a counselling forum. It's masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? And drinking is very much part of that. Oh, if you say to somebody, oh, you don't drink, to a guy, you then consider not a man, or you're less of a man because you don't drink. What's wrong with you? So there's also trying to keep that persona whereby it's part of being a man, it's part of this culture. Yet when you actually speak to people on a one-to-one basis, when they feel safe that they can actually open up, some of them don't even want to drink. They do it because they feel they have to. And all that then does is makes them feel weaker. When they feel weak, it then turns into anger. And you've got this internal conflict going inside. And the biggest struggle that I see amongst that culture, when you see them on their personal basis, is I can't be me. I cannot be me. And a lot of them, while we see the drinking culture amongst men, a lot of them individually say, I really don't want to drink, or I don't want to drink that much, but I feel I have to. So, you know, when you're going out, you say, oh, come on, one more. Oh, come on, don't be such a wuss. You feel okay, you get bladdered, and you beat yourself up afterwards because you think, what is this saying about me? And this is working with people who work on the boats, and whether they're captain or crew members, they have a real identity crisis because they're thinking, who am I? In order to be me, I can't be part of this group. So therefore, I've got to deny who I am to be part of this wider group. Yet neither really happy because you're taking on a role that's not you. And a lot of the other people are as well. Yes, you do get people who use drink as an escape, and that's their go-to place because they don't feel safe to open up. Whether it's to a colleague or a professional capacity or their wife or a friend. So drink is their space. Drink is where I numb the pain or I can release, and it then becomes their dependency. I've been drinking for 5, 10, 15 years. I don't know life without it. And the thought of going with a day or half a day without a drink for them is scary. It'd be like losing your best friend. So there's a real attachment there. And for me, when I'm working with the individuals and families, it's really going to the root, okay, what is the real reason behind the drink? And ironically or interestingly, depending on how you receive it, some don't want to work on the boat, but they feel trapped because the money's good, the lifestyle's good, and it's paying for the things at home. So, well, for me to go and do a normal 9-to-5 job is not going to bring in the revenue that I'm earning now. So for individuals feeling trapped, it's not good, but I'm speaking as a man. When we feel trapped, it's not a good sign. When we feel stuck, and then we'll drink more, then the anger will come out and the abuse and the fight. It's
just get stuck in a cycle of
it's a fire that really needs to be put out, but it will only be put out if we have forums such as this and safe space whereby we can say what's really going on, what we want to do, what we don't want to do, and that drink is not the answer.
It's interesting when we talk about peer pressure and this sort of herd mentality, because the conversations around alcohol consumption are usually about the self. How can I be sober? How can I say no? Or, actually I'm going to stay home this evening. But actually the education has to come for that person, but also for other people to respect the wishes of people who wish to be sober, not to put on the pressure, not to single them out as being different than the rest of the group. It's
yes, and is that sorry? No, so
Yeah.
it is that fear of being different, fear of standing out. But the irony of it is, so many people in that you're actually not standing out. You just need to be the first person to make that step, and then something else says, "Yes, I'm with you." So you think I'm the only person here who's struggling and who doesn't want to do this, but not knowing possibly the guy who you're drinking with or in that group is going through the same. And I just see it through the counselling, because I'm thinking, you guys either work on the same boat or you're socialised together, yet you're seeing me on an individual basis regarding similar problems.
Yeah. So what are the psychological effects of alcohol consumption? How can it harm our mental well-being and mental health? Gary, do you want to take this one?
Okay, yeah. I would say the obvious harm, energy, fatigue. You cannot perform at the same energy levels as when you've got a clear mind, as when you're sober. Also, I would say, probably familiar with Gabor Mate and his famous important quote when it says, "Don't ask about the addiction, it's why the pain." And the alcoholics have just come on because they've worked in the boat. They've got often used to alcohol before joining that industry. And it's really getting to the bottom of, okay, what pain are they covering up through the alcohol? And that pain could be the relationship, it could be a divorce, it could be financial struggles. And so there's psychological harm. It's not necessarily the alcohol itself, it's what it's trying to bury. But when you realise, when you sober up, that pain, that anger is still there, then you think, right, I've got to drink more. And then we're becoming more ineffective. The performance at work decreases, and then we're probably possibly faced with relationship issues, threat of losing your job, and then it just compounds and compounds and compounds. So really, when I'm working with patients and clients within the yachting industry who are suffering with alcohol abuse, most important for me is, okay, take me back. What was the pain? What did you experience, either as a child or adult? When did you first learn to turn to alcohol? When did you first start using it as a dependency, as self-medication? Because there's a reason why behind the what. So we focus on the what, the action, but there is a why behind that action. So psychologically, it's not the alcohol, it's whatever pain they're trying to numb through the alcohol or escape.
Laura, did you have an answer for that one?
Yeah. So I agree 100% with what you've said, Gary. And, as you say, it's not necessarily just alcohol. It could be gambling, online shopping, sex, whatever it is. It's a coping mechanism. And, I think often, if we talk about in yachting specifically, as there often isn't an outlet, and sometimes you can work on a boat where you don't have, like your safe person. On boats, often you quickly form bonds, but sometimes you don't have somebody, you're in a group of strangers. And so you do self-medicate. And whether that be something that's going on at home, something that's going on the boat, to combat feelings of stress, anxiety, loneliness. And it sort of gives you a temporary reprieve from whatever it is that you're feeling. But ultimately those feelings, as Gary said, they don't go away. They just sort of come back, often deeper, harder and stronger to then try and deal with. And the need to numb it again, as you say, comes back and the cycle continues.
And if someone is, I know that Laura, you've used the word sober curious or sober or even struggling with alcohol, and they want some kind of support system to help maintain their sobriety, help them with alcohol consumption, excessive drinking. What are the options that they have?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and that's the sort of thing that I have been working on, basically. So I trained as a coach, but I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert in sobriety. I only speak through my own experience, which people seem to resonate with. But I think the thing is that if you have an addiction, and even if it's not an addiction, I think that's another thing that's really important to highlight. You don't have to be addicted to anything to want to change your relationship with it. You know, lots of people in my sort of personal life, when they found out I gave up drinking, it was like, oh my God, are you an alcoholic? And it's like, well, it's a really sort of, it's a bit of a demonized term. Like, I didn't like my relationship with alcohol and I wanted to change it. I don't need to be like drinking first thing in the morning when I open my eyes to want to change my relationship with alcohol. But I, you know, I think it's also really important. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. That there's not a sort of one size fits all cure. There's not a sort of, okay, if you want to become sober, this is what you must do. So I think there are lots of different ways. For some people, it's a fellowship like AA. For other people, it's 1 year no beer. For 1 year, it's therapy. For one person, it could be therapy, or, you know, there are so many different ways. And it's just creating a place where people can access those resources and find out what works for them.
And Gary?
Yeah, it's, as you were speaking, Laura, I was thinking about the word identity, and it's regards to how do I want to be associated with alcohol? Do I want zero relationship with alcohol? Do I want to be a social occasion? Do I want to be able to, you know, I control it when I have a drink? Or do I accept that I've got a problem, I want to do something about it, or I've got a problem, I don't want to do something about it? And because, as I mentioned earlier, if you've depended on something for a big part of your life as a coping mechanism, the thought of doing without it is scary. It could be the same in a relationship. You don't want to lose a partner because even though they might be abusive to you, the thought of them not being there is actually more harmful than in your mind than them being there and abusing, which is why we often question, why do people stay in abusive relationships? Well, with alcohol, if it's abusing us, it is an abusive relationship, but the fear of being without it is greater. So I believe what's needed more, for example, I work more on individual, but I'm really trying to promote more group therapy, because I think the more safe space we can have where it's more than 3-4 people that open up and share their experiences, the better we are, because then we don't feel so alone. We don't feel judged or criticised or that big word shame. And I know that we've got Alcohol Anonymous, which is a worldwide here, but people still are fearful of going there just in case they see somebody that they know. And especially on an island like Mallorca, whereby in the expat community, most people know most people. You know each other through directly or indirectly. So
Especially in your
fear factor there of, yeah, you know, it's a glorified village. So it's really trying to break that by making it feel more safe and having that trust element there, that those famous words, it is okay. So for me, it's more group, and the ultimate is talking. Yeah, we could have the right tools and plans and programs, but without talking, there's very little change, because we need to share our experiences.
Absolutely, and I think that was what you're trying to do here with the sober cruise social club. I almost got those 4 words mixed up.
Oh my God, if I could start again, I would change the name. It is such a mouthful, and every time I say it, I like trip over it. It's ridiculous, but I'm here and I'm sticking with it. But yeah, that is exactly it. And you know, with something like alcohol, whether you feel like you have a problem or you don't, exactly as Gary says, this is my message every time I share anything, is just reach out and talk to somebody. And this is the benefit of things like, I agree it completely. So, you know, the plan for me in the future is to have something like that, a safe space where people can come together and share their experiences, because it is so isolating, especially with an addiction such as alcohol. Well, I suppose any addiction, but with alcohol, it does often change the way that somebody behaves, and then they act in ways that are out of character, ways that they don't like. They may do things that they are ashamed of, and it perpetuates that cycle. And I think often it can be a case of somebody may not necessarily have sort of trauma in the past that they're drinking for, but sometimes alcohol addiction can grow, and it is insidious and it's very progressive because of the alcohol itself. You do something, you go out, you get really drunk, you feel like an absolute asshole. The next day you don't know how to look at yourself in the mirror, you feel really embarrassed, you're on board, everybody on the boat saw, and then, you know, then there's that shame, and then again it just becomes more and more difficult to deal with. And in my experience, being open and talking about this sort of thing really is the only way to deal with it, because the more alone you feel, the deeper that feeling of shame is, and it just gives you more reason. And you know, there are so many people who stop drinking but don't deal with what's going on internally, and so they just pick something else up. You know, it changes. Okay, good, I'm no longer drinking, but actually I'm spending 12 hours a day scrolling on my phone because I can't be alone with my own thoughts. You know, it's like it just shifts. But the trouble with alcohol is it obviously is physically has a very negative impact.
Yeah, we have a question from Beat Library who's said, have you found a substitute when on board? When I want to hang with my crew, alcohol is always part of our bonding. So I guess what are the alternatives to drinking?
Well, I think immediately in reading that, I mean, there are so many alcohol-free alternatives. If in the immediate, you know, you want a substitute so you still feel like you're part of, because that's such a, you know, it's a human driver, is to be inside, not outside the group. And you know, I drink alcohol-free beers, or I'll have like a gin and tonic, because I don't want to sit there with my sad glass of lukewarm tap water feeling like I'm not involved, you know. And so
and there are so many alternatives. It's kind of trendy now, isn't it?
There are so many alternatives. There are so many alcohol-free beers, so many gins and loads of wines, most of which are absolutely revolting, to be honest.
I love a mocktail.
No, but there really are so many alternatives. But then also in terms, like in a deeper way, I think it comes from the top. Whereby there needs to be the initiative to have more crew bonding activities that aren't centered around alcohol. And, you know, that's really personal. It's not a one size fits all. Every crew is different. But I think I think Hugo mentioned yesterday, having things like suggestion boxes with things that people like doing, I think that's a great idea. But I mean, there are so many alternatives. Go-karting, you're on a boat, have a water sports day, go ice cream tasting, you know, go on a track day, do something, go on a tour, go on a trek. You know, it doesn't have to be like, oh, let's just fall into the Blue Lady because it's the closest pub and everyone we know is going to be there. You know, there are so many different things that can be done. But I think interacting with your crew and having a captain, head of department that is mindful of that and is involved and is aware of what's going on and trying to create that cohesion without the sort of lazy option of just getting pissed.
Certainly from a dock walk perspective, and here in Fort Lauderdale, the options for crew we've noticed are all to do with drinking, open bar, kind of mixers. And I've seen over in Europe that there's one club that comes to mind. They're called Yachtie's Run Wild, and they're a group of girls, all yacht crew, that just go running every week, every Wednesday.
They're in Palma.
Yeah, in Palma. I mean, they do run to the bar. Yeah. But it's not the drinking isn't at the heart of it. It's the running and the community and the bringing, you know, coming together of people. So, and that was just started. That didn't even come from sort of top down leadership. That was just started kind of bottom up. But how important, Gary, do you think is leadership, people in leadership positions when it comes to promoting healthier means of bonding on board?
Very, very important. I mean, we're aware that culture starts at the top. It starts with the leader, and any effective change has got to start from those people who are in charge. And the yachting industry is a unique industry because, to my understanding, it depends on the owner of the boat or the captain. So you can have two boats next to each other with completely different cultures. So I'm not sure if it was you who mentioned it earlier, Holly, about education. It's getting the owners and the captains to see the benefit of having crew members whereby the drinking culture is not dominant. And whether that's through even saving cost of money, recruitment, having better performance, but they need to see the benefit, because If they've grown up in that culture and they see it as old school, they're going to think, well, basically, this is what we do. It's part of yachting. It's what appeals to people. But when they see the risk and we hear more about the potential harms that it's doing to the individuals on the boat, their families, the ripple effect it has, it may have a wake-up call. And I know there is some positive work going on, but like everything, we need more. So for me, if we were to do the education and programs such as this, which is fantastic, we need the people who can make the effective change to be engaging in this. Otherwise, it's a much harder struggle.
Awesome. And we're kind of coming to the end of our discussion now. I just wanted to get some final thoughts and final advice from the both of you, and where you see kind of alcohol consumption going in the next few years. Are we going to see this big reduction because of new crew coming in who are drinking less? Laura?
I think it will be a slow effect, a slow sort of thing. I think it will happen, just as we say, naturally, people are drinking less. And especially, as I say, the younger generation, people of my generation, if you wanted to go out and meet your friends or you wanted to pull somebody, you had to go to a bar. Nowadays, everybody just sits on their phone and that's how they communicate, So I think naturally it is going to change, but it's a slow process because of the nature of the industry. And I think I was told once, the way that the industry works is everything goes along, then something bad happens, and then we address it. So we've lost crew members to suicide, and now we have a big push in the industry for mental health and wellness, which is amazing. There has to be. There's been needing to be a big shift for years. But I just think it's only a matter of time before we start to see more and more incidents happen. And I know people who've fallen overboard when they've been drunk. I've known captains who've crashed boats because they've been drunk. It's only a matter of time before these sort of incidents, there's a bigger incident that really causes an issue. And I think, as I was saying, it needs to start from the top. It needs to be sort of included with the STCW. There needs to be more knowledge. But just to anybody who is struggling, just please know that you're not alone. Always reach out. There are so many different people you can talk to, myself being one of them, where you can find a judgment-free space and somebody who's probably been through whatever you're going through. And just share, break the shame, share, and I promise you it will feel easier.
Gary, closing thoughts?
Yeah, echo those words. You feel alone, but you're not alone. And it's recognizing the difference. Nobody can deny how you're feeling. You may feel alone, but you are most certainly not alone. And there's so many different support networks out there. And I'll just encourage anybody who's listening to this now or in the future come across, just reach out. Even if it's to a friend or a stranger, someone, just reach out, because you'll realize very quickly, wow, I've got support. I am not on my own, even though I feel alone.
Yeah, super. And Sober Crew Social Club and the Gap Counselling both have Instagram channels, and I'm sure their DMs are open if anyone has any other questions or does want to reach out for some advice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I think that brings us to the end of section 2. Thank you so much. No, I think we could have continued this conversation on for another half hour, but I'd love to speak to you both again soon in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This was amazing. I think I completely agree with Holly, and everybody else does as well. This could have been a forum on its own. So thank you all. We are doing that 2-minute break, and then we'll come back, and Holly will be monitoring our next session and on how to pick a therapist. So we will see you back soon. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm very excited about this session on how to pick a therapist with Dr. Edith Shiro and Gary Napier. I know you've seen both now on different sessions, and I'm so happy they're coming together for this and very insightful one. Here, you'll gain insights on selecting the right therapist for your needs. The session will guide you through the process of finding a mental health professional who understands the unique pressures of yacht life and can provide effective support.
Hello again.
Hi, hi, hi.
Hi, how are you all?
Hi, hi, hi. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So I just want to reintroduce the two people that we have here on screen. It's Dr. Edith Shiro, who's a clinical psychologist, co-founder of the Trauma and Resilience Center and author of the book, The Unexpected Gift of Trauma. And I also have here on screen Gary Napier, who is a psychologist, life coach, and founder of Gap Counseling. So we're talking about how to pick a therapist. And as someone who's been in therapy for, I think, over a year now, I went through that experience a year ago, and it wasn't easy. It's not the easiest thing to do. So hopefully in this talk, we're going to be able to guide you through how to pick the right therapist and what to look for and what that therapist is going to be able to work with you on and do for you. So let's start with talking about what it is about crew on board and the unique mental health challenges that they face in that situation. I'll start with Edith.
Yes. And actually, earlier on, I was talking a little bit about that when I was talking about trauma. And I really love the conversation you had about alcohol use and abuse. I think one of the big challenges as a clinical psychologist that I have and living in Miami, I've worked with crew members and I've worked with some of the yachting community. And what I've seen that is very unique to this culture is the level of isolation sometimes that people have to experience, not for a day, for a week, but maybe sometimes even for months. And that exacerbates and increases the isolation, increases the incapacity to find resources for help or to have more structure or more support system. The other thing is maybe not having a routine to be able to follow every day because of all the changes, because there's not like one place to sleep or to eat or to please, because people change. Another thing is like dealing with cultural diversity. Sometimes we come into working on a boat with people that are so different from us and from a cultural perspective, from a way of talking and speaking and eating and dressing and understanding life, and those belief systems might be very, very different from ours. So how do we develop that tolerance or dealing with those changes? And another thing that I think happens is also that sometimes we don't have the support system around when something happens on the boat, because everybody is coexisting together. There's no boundaries sometimes. So the work environment and the personal environment or family or friends are all meshed with each other. So you're wearing like different hats and different roles at the same time. Sometimes I am a crew member, sometimes I'm just a friend, sometimes I'm a supporter of somebody else, sometimes I'm like, so it can be very challenging. So, and then that's very unique to the yachting community. So, no wonder some of the traumas and some of the anxieties and depressions that happen, get manifested with drinking and with many other issues. So,
yeah, I think it's important to understand that the situation that crew find themselves in isn't normal. No sleep, living and working with your colleagues, sleeping next to your colleagues, and just being in such close proximity. It is a pressure cooker, and while you're all in the same boat. Some people have the capacity to handle it maybe better than others, and if you're struggling, it's okay, because it's not a normal and particularly healthy circumstance. That's for sure. So when it comes to picking a therapist, if you've just made the decision that you want to try therapy, give it a go, think it might be helpful, I guess we're going to talk about what it is that you need to look for. Because when I was searching, therapist near me, it came up with a directory, and it was hundreds and hundreds of pages of headshots, names, and little acronyms at the end of their names that meant absolutely nothing to me. And it was overwhelming, and I didn't know where to start. And that was one of the reasons I had put it off for so long. So let's talk about the little acronyms. What are the qualifications that you're trying to look for when you're picking a therapist? Gary, would you like to go first? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So when I was in therapy years ago, I was referred by somebody, which is often the safer way because they know you as a person and they'll trust the person they're referred to, that there'll be a connection. As you said, for the majority of people, it is going through a directory list and thinking, right, how do I go through tens and hundreds of people and pick out a therapy that's for me? I've done that recently for one of our daughters, and I go by a feel, connection. So even if I look at the qualification, what they're experiencing naturally, of say for anxiety, it'll bring up a list of people with anxiety. But the number one importance to me, and I say this to people when I'm assessing them and referring other counsellors to them, is, do I connect to this person? Another word for connection. Do I relate to this person? Because without the connection, without being able to relate to this person, it's unlikely you're going to fully open up. You're not going to feel fully safe. And therefore, the relationship itself is restricted before it starts, because the connection is, if you saw on the internet, if it says weak, it's going to feel like, well, this is not going to last. So you want a connection that's very, very strong. And that connection could be anything from as simple as, well, I like the look of that person. There's something about it that makes it feel warm. It could be their experience. It could be culturally, I can relate to them. It could be they're in the same location, I want face-to-face, but whatever makes you feel connected to that person. I would also say, in a more academic arena, and I'm sure Edith's aware of it, there are a lot of people out there who set them up as therapists, counsellors, psychologists without the required training or the qualifications. And that is very harmful. But as a person, you're not going to know that. So I would, as part of looking for a therapist, is check out their qualifications. Are they registered? How long have they been practiced? Because you need to be also certain that, as well as having that connection with the person, they have the ability to help me and support me. And I'm going to feel safe throughout the journey with this individual.
And what are the qualifications that we're looking for?
So in the UK, there's the highest, the most recommended profession is the BACP, and also go on the counselling directory. So to go on the counselling directory or Psychologist today, you need to be a recommended practice. You've got credibility. There's also another platform, not sure if you have it in the US, it's called BARK, B-A-R-K. Now, that's another source of clients finding therapists, but I would say it's also open to people who've just set up as a therapy on their own, without the right training. So I would say just be a bit more careful. But generally, when you speak with that person, once again, it goes back, do I feel right? Do they understand me? Do they relate to what I'm speaking to them about? So if I don't feel that I can relate to their problem, or I'm not the best experienced person in terms of what they're looking to achieve, I would refer them to somebody else, because it's not, the demand outstrips the supply. So it's not an industry whereby you're fighting, therapists are fighting over clients, so we just got to sell ourselves. No, it's really about putting the client first. So as a client looking for a therapist, once again, do I connect? Do I feel safe? Will I feel heard? And can they help me make the change that I'm looking for?
So just because a therapist has every accreditation and qualification and probably is the most qualified therapist that exists on this earth, doesn't mean you necessarily are going to get along with them, and they're the person for you. No,
and I'd say briefly that speaking to somebody the other day, and they were trying to get hold of me for 2-3 weeks, that's an old number of mine, and they said they reached out to somebody else, and they said during the assessment it was very, and this person had lots of qualifications. Oh, okay, yeah, so when do you want to start? When are you available? They didn't get to know the person. And he said, yeah, I just didn't feel the warmth. I didn't feel like they cared. And speaking to one of my supervisees recently, he said the difference he tries to make with his clients is that I actually love what I do. And I love my clients, my patients, and that's what I bring into the room. Whereas naturally you do need a heart for counselling, for therapy, for psychology. But I do believe that we could be so formal and rigid that the person there who's sitting there with their trauma doesn't feel it. It's like, yes, you've got all the qualifications, but I'm not feeling it from you. And guess what? They don't turn up the next week.
And Edith, same question to you. Where do you start and what do you look for?
Yes, I really appreciate what Gary's saying. And I want to tell you something. I've been a clinical psychologist for 30 years almost here in the United States. And what seems very common sense for me, and I'm like, of course, just go to therapy, I've realized more and more and more that it's such a hard journey for a person from the moment they decide that they want therapy or that they need therapy to the moment where they feel in that place, what Gary was describing, safe and connected and understood. And that's why I love talking about this. I'm very excited that actually mental health and going to therapy is destigmatized more and more, thanks to COVID, thanks to people Gen Z, and thanks to social. Like, I love it that we are talking about this, that everybody's interested. I don't know how it is in London, Gary, but definitely here in the United States, we're all full, overwhelmed. I have like months of waiting list, and everybody wants to be in therapy. So I'm all for that. I'm very happy for that. But I want to even start by something very specific and very basic, which is the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Let's begin with that, and let me know if in other parts of the world it makes sense. A psychiatrist is a person that has studied medicine, is trained to give medication. Most psychiatrists that have an MD after their name. So that's why when you're going through the list, and Holly, I hope that was helpful for you too. Like, you go through the list and you see MD after the names, that's great and wonderful. They're medical doctors. That doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to do therapy. They know how to prescribe, how to give medication, maybe for anxiety, for depression, for OCD, for ADHD, for psychosis, for bipolar, all of that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to sit with you for an hour and do this proper therapy. So that's psychiatry. As psychologists, then we have a whole range, and then it can be a counselor, it can be a psychotherapist, it can be a coach. Sometimes in the United States, in order to be called a psychologist, you have to have a PhD or you have to have a PsyD, meaning a doctor in psychology, a doctor in philosophy. So you have to be a doctor. That means that you have to have a doctorate. In my experience, it's important that people do have some length of training and expertise in order to do therapy, also depending on the topic and depending what you do. But I recommend people first and foremost to look for those letters of PhD or PsyD, PSYD, because that guarantees that at least a person had many years. I mean, I studied for 15 years to be a psychologist in this country, but that doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a good therapist or you're going to have a good connection. But I'm saying, like, that's a good way to start. A coach that has no letters after their name can also be good, or a social worker can also have that. So that's not requirement. I'm just saying these are possibilities. So a psychologist, a social worker, a counselor, a psychotherapist, a coach, these are all varieties of things. And then another thing to look for, and then and then we can move forward, is what is it that you're looking for specifically? Because are you looking for help because of your ADHD, because you need help with how to concentrate more, because you're hyperactive and you don't know where to go? Are you looking for help because you are getting divorced, or you're not having a relationship with your spouse or with your partner or with your lover? Are you looking for help because your parenting skills are, you think you're doing good, but you're all over the place, or you don't know how to handle your kids, or because you have problems in school? Are you looking for help because you have an addiction, because you have addictive behavior with alcohol, with drugs, with shopping, with sex, with porn, with whatever, all of these things are specific. So let's say if you're going to the doctor because you have a heart problem, you don't go to a gastroenterologist, you don't go to an eye doctor, you go to the cardiologist, right? Like, it's very specific. In the same way, in the field of psychology, we have specific qualifications and specific trainings. If you're going for sex therapy, you're not going to go to to a child or a school psychologist. You're going to somebody that knows about couples, that has experience in sexuality. So I encourage people always to be very specific about what they're looking for the issues that they're looking for. And then I can continue. And then, what else you look for? You look for the cultural, similarity. You also look for something in person. I usually encourage people to try to be in therapy in person. That really makes a big difference. It's okay also to do it on Zoom or online, but you can have both.
And how do you find out that their specialty? I assume it's just read their bios. I mean, most therapists that I've seen come with a bio and they'll explain the areas that they specialize in. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times it's in their bios, but a lot of the times is really picking up the phone. I tell people this is like going shopping. You go shopping for the person that is going to fit you. It's not the first, when you go shopping, you just don't grab the first dress or the first pair of pants, you just wear it and go with it. You go look for it, you try it out, you ask the questions, you see how. So go call the person and say, what's your specialty? Hello, I want therapy. What do you specialize in? In children, in adults, in marriage, in addictions, in behaviors, in traumas, depending on what it is, there's certain kinds of therapies that are specific to that. For example, I work with trauma. Trauma is one of my specialties. EMDR, somatic therapy. There's all kinds of specific things related to trauma specifically. So these are all questions that you need to be asking.
And we have a question on screen. I'll come to Gary for this one first. From the Clever Traveller. What questions should I ask a therapist to see if a therapist is a good fit for me before committing?
Okay. Well, tagging off with what Edith was just sharing, are they specialised in what I need help with? So if I'm suffering with alcohol addiction, is this therapist specialised in working with alcohol addiction? And when people ask me questions, the most potent ones are the question where they say, what made you go into therapy? What's your why? Because then you're finding out what's the reason why this person is doing this work, and can I relate to that? Also, another important question to ask when you're looking for a therapist is how do you work? What's your style of therapy? So some people might be very short-term solution. Other people might say, I go down and identify the root or the root causes. This would be long, but what's your style of therapy? Because that helps me understand, okay, what the treatment's like to be, manage expectations. Would I be comfortable with this? Clients often come and say, especially in the UK, I'm not sure about the US, Edith, whereby it's CBT. And really what they're asking for is just give me the tools to move on. They forget about the cognitive side, just give me the tools and I'm okay. And so I have to manage their expectations and see whether, it does fit for them. But I'd say that those are the important questions that as somebody seeking therapy should be asking.
And same question to you, Edith. What are the questions that you should be asking, or me as a person who is seeking therapy should ask to their potential future therapist?
Yeah, so I would ask, I agree with Gary. These are very important questions. I would ask some of the practical questions and then some of the style questions. So practical questions. How long is the session? Is it half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour? How much do you charge? If you're not going through insurance, how much you charge to make sure? Is it in person or is it virtual or is it both? Is it telemedicine? Another question to ask, what's your specialty? What's your background? Are you more of a cognitive behavioral? It's not that's not too many options. It's either cognitive behavioral, psychodynamic, more human relationship in human. No, Gary, what else? Like 2 or 3 different options, and that's it. So that gives you an idea of people are going to go more into like very practical ways of doing, or they're going to go back into looking at your childhood and your whole history. What's your culture? Also, I think the cultural piece is important. It's important to talk about it. Are you comfortable with somebody that has an accent, with somebody that is a different culture from you, with a different religious belief? Some people even have a problem with political issues. I mean, here in the United States, for example, there was a time in which, Democrats and Republicans could not sit together. I don't even know if it's still like that. But these are all these things that are important to ask. You don't have to know the whole story, but to really know, is this a safe space for me to be dealing with my issues? And going from the very practical, then to the very nuanced one. And sometimes for the nuanced questions, it's more like experiencing one session. I would encourage people usually to say, just have one session with that person to see if it clicks, to see if you're comfortable. And then you can have, one session with 2 or 3 other people and then compare. Are you okay with this? Are you okay with that one? What resonated with you more?
I remember, sorry, carry on.
No, absolutely, all yours.
No, so I do remember one client in particular asking me, can you help me? It was very direct, and they're asking they were very vulnerable, and I had to really pause and consider that question. It sounds very obvious, but I had to be true. Like, can I help this person with regards to the struggle they were presenting to me? I did say yes, but I thought it was such an important question and brave for them to ask that. Can you help me?
I love that. I've had that question asked also. And sometimes, we really have to be very honest how to answer that question. I really appreciate that. So yes, I also pause and say, I can help you. I cannot guarantee anything, but I can help you. Or sometimes I've said, I can be here with you. And you also need a psychiatrist, that this, that, the other, and maybe there's a group of professionals that need to be involved. So it's a great question.
Is it important?
Edith, can I ask you a question just based on what you said previously about sampling? You didn't use the word sample, but trying 2 or 3 therapists. Is there, I don't know if the culture is different in the US compared to UK, is there, whilst people should have the freedom of choice, is there a danger where it's a taste and see, where you then end up, sometimes the client themselves don't actually commit to a therapist because you may hear people say, I've had 3 or 4 different therapists and they didn't help me. I'm now trying to use the 5th person. For me, that raises alarm bells because I think, okay, if you had 4 therapists, there's something wrong with your selection process. What's going on here?
For example, no, that's a great question. And whenever I'm seeing somebody for the first time, I ask them, have you seen anybody else? Are you already in therapy? I don't think it's very healthy to have many therapists at the same time. I don't recommend it at all, actually. I don't think it's a great idea. What I suggest sometimes at least in the US, we give a consultation session. Sometimes we don't even charge because there's a question here in the US, especially, how do I minimize the money spent on the shopping around face? Honestly, I've given consultation sessions for 15 minutes for no charge. And I think a lot of therapists do that. So you get a feel. I also, me as a psychologist, I also need to know if the patient that is coming to see me is a good fit. It's not just the patient that is deciding that. I'm also deciding. So we need those 15 minutes at least, or some moment. I do it usually over the phone. Sometimes I invite the person in and I say, have this with me. And that's it. I'm not going to continue a therapy, more sessions until you've decided the one person that you're going to see. So that is something to check and to make sure it doesn't happen, and say, I understand you're shopping around. You could do one session here, one session there, but you have to make a decision. And then you make the decision with the one person that you stick with. And then you have to have that commitment to do the work. If it doesn't work at the end or later, okay, you can change, but definitely the commitment to one person.
I know that you described it as it's like shopping. I don't know if you're familiar with the singer Meghan Trainor,
yes,
who wrote all about that bass. The other day, she was on a podcast and she said that sort of picking a therapist is like dating. You go on the first date, see if it's a match. Oh, well, maybe we'll do a second date and see if we progress, from there. And then by the 3rd date, you probably know if it's a yes or a no, and if you're going to continue or go with someone else. Now, that made me smile. I thought that was a funny way of looking at it.
That's a great way, as long as you're not dating many people at the same time.
Also not unhealthy. It's an unhealthy practice. So, and in terms of when you're looking for a therapist, is it important that they have experience specifically with yacht crew?
I mean, I can, for my answer is, I rather, if I'm a crew member and I have issues, let's say with alcohol or dealing with somebody on the board or having some sexual harassment, I rather go to somebody that has some idea of what the crew life is about, or that can really has some information about what's going on, than with somebody that is clueless about it. Now, it doesn't mean because then people ask me, oh, you mean you have to be sexually abused, divorced, discriminated against, being an immigrant in order to help people that are sexually abused, immigrants? No. I don't have to live every single thing that my patients have lived in order to help them, but definitely have an informed understanding of the culture where they come from. For example, like I work with people that are very religious. I'm not religious at all, but if I don't understand the religion that they come from, it's very hard for me to be in that place and to hold them, what is culturally acceptable, not acceptable. If I don't know anything about the yachting culture and somebody's telling me, oh, I drink every day, I might say, you are off the charts. But in the yachting culture, that's a norm. That's more of the norm. That's more of the average.
And Gary, what's your take on that? Is it important for someone, to have worked with crew in the past, or it's just, working with people in high pressure environments?
In agreement with Edith, there does need to be an identification, especially within the yachting industry, because it is so unique, which we cannot be overemphasized. So I would think it would be very difficult, say for myself, who hasn't worked specifically on the yachting industry, if I didn't have an idea of the culture and what goes on the working practice through the people that I socialize with and work with on a professional basis, it would feel very foreign for me, and therefore I may not give the right treatment to somebody who's worked in the industry because I don't really fully understand it, and that therefore wouldn't be right for the client, and also it doesn't make them feel safe because you're working with somebody who doesn't, in layman's terms, doesn't fully get it.
And no, that's a good point. And I guess one of the biggest difficulties with yacht crew seeking therapy is that the time that they have isn't really their own, and trying to slot it into their schedule that's quite erratic. And I know that a lot of people do therapy 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. Do therapists have the flexibility to be able to offer kind of ad hoc sessions, or be able to squeeze it in around the crew's schedule?
That's a great question, Holly. Actually, I mean, I've worked with crew. I love them. I mean, these are people that I absolutely love, and they were in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm here in Miami. And we went through hoops just to schedule a session, but obviously it required from me. I always was laughing with my colleagues about like, oh, I have a patient that is on the other side of the world. It took us like 15 minutes just to find the time to schedule a session. And obviously it was on Zoom most of the time, unless they were here on the port of Miami. But I had to put as a psychologist, the intention and the willingness and the openness to be flexible. Yes, maybe with my other patients, of course, I have the same Tuesdays at 4 every week, fine. But if I'm working with a crew, if I'm working with people on boat, I definitely have to have the flexibility. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Because, as you very well said, that's not something that happens every week at the same time, in the same place. So sometimes, it was 10 at night. Sometimes it was 7 in the morning. Sometimes it was on a weekend. And yes, I cannot have, I was perfectly fine with that. I cannot tell you like I could have 10 patients like that, because that would be all over the place. But having one or two, it's okay. I think it's important, and that's a great thing to know. If you're looking for a therapist, make sure that the therapist is flexible, that the therapist is willing to go with you with your schedule, that the therapist is open for changes and not keep like charging you every time you change something. So it requires somebody that understands that, and somebody that is willing to be open and informed about, the uniqueness of working with the club, the seafarers and the yachting community.
And Gary, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, Edith hinted at it. It's being flexible also that there may be last minute cancellations. And it's accepting that because it goes with the industry. If the captain says you need to be required on the boat tomorrow without prior knowledge, you've got to roll with it rather than saying, okay, sorry, that's a late cancellation, I'm charging you.
And there's a question on screen from Tammy. Thank you for your question. How can I be sure which type of therapy is best for me? We touched on a couple of these earlier: cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic, and humanistic. I haven't heard of that third one actually, but I'm not the pro. So when you see these on screen, what do they mean, and what are the terms of kind of each one of these three that have been listed? Gary, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start with the humanistics. That was really promoted by a gentleman called Carl Rogers, and he changed the style of therapy whereby less of the therapist being an expert, it was more on an equal footing. And it was really, its three conditional factors were congruence, unconditional positive regard, and empathy. So unconditional positive regard is that you offer the maximum respect to the client. Congruence means that you as the therapist is completely showing up as your true self. And empathy, we know, that means that you'll be able to feel what the other person's going through. So it's very much whereby it's on an equal basis. So you'll work with the client in terms of drawing the information, the answers from the client themselves. So you're not there ready to say, right, you've got that question, I've got the answer. Like, no, I'm going to help you tease it out. I'm going to help you to come to realize, increase awareness regards to the problem you have and how best to work through it. So it's more of a collaboration between the therapist and the client, and it's very popular. With CBT, as I mentioned earlier, it's more about what thoughts are influencing your behavior, and it's then changing the thoughts to make a positive behavior. Many clients, as I said earlier, that they don't really want to spend too much time on the thought process. They just want to change the behavior. And I say, well, we can't change the behavior unless you change your thinking. So sometimes it could be a struggle. It's making the client aware why there's a process, why it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, not just behavioral therapy. And psychodynamic is where you go deep. You're going back to, I'm sure Edith used that with trauma-based clients. So that's when you're not just looking at the here and now going forward. It's going back as to what happened in the past that's currently affecting now or causing what's going on in your life now. I personally, sorry, carry on. No, carry on.
Okay, I was saying, I guess it's also not about me choosing, well, I want CBT or I want this kind of therapy. It can also be up to the therapist to say, actually, I think this style and this approach might be better for you in your specific situation.
Yes, I mean, I think as professionals, we have a responsibility to guide our clients and to make the recommendation, I feel for you and what you're going through, what you're looking to achieve. This is the best course of action for you. It'd be like us going to a doctor and us telling the doctor, no, you need to prescribe me this. You wouldn't do that. So whilst there's input from the client, you wouldn't want to work with the client without their agreement. Once again, we do have a responsibility to say, I believe this is the best modality for you. And if they disagree, say, for example, they strongly want CBT, and I think they need to go down the psychodynamic route, then I'm perhaps not the best person to work with, because I'll be doing myself an injustice by just go down a route. I don't know if it's best for the client, so I would then say, perhaps maybe you should work with somebody else.
And Edith, do you have a take on this?
Yeah, I'm impressed with Gary describing the modalities. Very good, Gary. It's funny because sometimes, patients come and say, how they are advertisings for medications, and patients go to the doctor, say, I think you should give me this, that, and the other medication. And I'm like, where are you coming that from? No, go to the psychologist or go to the therapist and say, this is my problem, this is the situation, this is what I want to, and then hopefully the responsible therapist and the good one, like Gary's saying, is going to say, maybe the best course of action for you is something that is more cognitive behavioral, or maybe the best course of action for you is more somatic therapy, or more eye movement desensitization, or you have to do a combination of medication and psychodynamic. It depends. And not every therapist has all the specialties, and not every therapist can do both CBT and DVD and DBT, and some of us have one more than the other. It's very important that the therapist themselves is responsible in saying that and saying, if you're looking for something specific, like for example DBT, which is dialectic behavioral therapy, I'm going to refer you to somebody else because that's not something I do. Or if you're looking specifically to work on your ADHD, okay, then I'm going to refer you to a therapist that works specifically with that, because I would do more psychodynamic or more humanistic, or so that you would be better off with somebody that focuses on that. So that's why the question about how do you work and what's your line of working or what's your specialty when you're looking for a therapist is so important. Even if you don't know exactly what's good for you, it's important to have the conversation and to keep looking. Ultimately, though, I think at the end of all of this, the human being behind all those letters and all those specialties is what counts the most.
Yeah.
If you're connecting with another human being that is there for you, that is making you feel safe, that is listening to you properly, that is not doing inappropriate things, hopefully, and that you feel like you're advancing and you're discovering new things about yourself, and that you're feeling like you're being helped, that really makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. And there's another question on screen. If I can't find a therapist with a flexible schedule, what can I do? Should I go to an online portal? I guess it's talking about online resources that might be a helpful alternative. Do you have any recommendations?
So Edith, or do you want me?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I think what we already said, like it really, you have to ask for the schedule, and maybe most of the time with a flexible schedule, you might not be able to see the therapist in person. So it has to be a therapist that you can see online and that is willing to keep changing the schedule in order to fit it to what's going on in your life.
I think also, I know it's difficult to fit in the schedules when your yacht crew can be, then there's not a clear routine. But also if you ask your captain, sometimes you might not want to disclose you're in therapy, but if I was in a leadership position, in fact, in work, the only time that I could make with my therapist was during working hours in a lunch break. And I spoke to my boss and I said, listen, I really want to start therapy. I think it would help me in my personal life, also in my work life. This is the time we've agreed, would that work? And she said, absolutely. She said, absolutely, we should be accommodating for this. So perhaps if you spoke to your captain or your chief stew or manager, they might be able to carve out the time for you to be able to do therapy. So it's look at your schedule, looking at the therapist's schedule, and also making sure that there's provision on board for you to be able to take the time you need for your own mental health.
That's wonderful, Holly, that you did that. And that's an amazing recommendation to say there's nothing wrong with being in therapy. It actually might improve my performance. Can we carve out some time that is respected for me to have this session once a week? That's wonderful. I think that's a great solution.
And if they say absolutely not, then there are alternatives, but also I think that's not a particularly good show of leadership.
Yeah.
Maybe you can change it at that point.
I know we're going to be wrapping up this session soon. This is actually what I wanted to talk about, cost and insurance and how that all works. Scott Kidd has said, are there better options for insurance coverage where some of these sessions are covered? I'm not actually sure how insurance for yacht crew works. That's something that I should really look into. Do all therapists take all insurances? I guess not. Can you guys speak to that?
I can only speak very briefly into it. Something that PA Rachel's looking into, because we've had people require, like, do we cover insurance or take insurance for mental health therapy, and we don't at the moment. So it's something we're looking into, but I can't really say I'm not qualified to answer this question right now.
Yeah, and also in the UK, therapy is, health insurance is a much bigger topic in the US than it is the UK, because in the UK we have the NHS. or we have sort of private healthcare. Edith, do you have any views on that?
Yeah, so there are a few alternatives. Some therapists don't work with insurance at all. Like me, I don't work with insurance, but I work with a sliding scale, meaning like depending on what goes on and what situation, I negotiate with the patient and say, okay, what can I have this sliding scale, we can fit you in it. But if if you have insurance, most people don't know that insurance covers therapy. So that's one piece of information that is important to say. Insurance most insurance do cover therapy. That's part of the medical and health field, and it's okay to ask. The second thing is that insurances might not cover all the cost of the whole session, but might cover some percentage, which is very helpful. And the third thing is that sometimes the therapist might not be in the network of the insurance, but insurances accept out of network therapy, meaning that if you show that you've paid for your therapy sessions and you send that to your insurance, they reimburse you. So that's another option. So there are many, and there are many other options, a few other options as well. So keep looking for that. I encourage people always to say, okay, let me pick up the phone and talk to the insurance and see what are my alternatives. Inform yourself. Don't let that be the reason why you're not in therapy. There's always a way around it. I work with some networks of therapists that really charge very low money because it's a whole network. I actually train the therapists in those networks, and for $50 they can get some great sessions. And there's other options as well. I think here in the United States, you can always go to the American Psychological Association and get some more information of therapists that are available. There are pro bono organizations that provide therapy. So that should not be an excuse.
There's always an option.
There's always an option.
Wonderful. We've come to the end of our session. Again, like the last one, I could have continued to speak to you both about this for another half an hour, I'm sure. But if anyone's watching and is interested and wants to reach out to Gary or Dr. Edith, their email inboxes, I'm sure, are open. But thank you so much. And I'm sure we've got Andrea appearing on the screen any second now.
Thank you so much,
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was truly amazing. Selfishly, I benefited a lot from this session myself. So I was very excited. Same as the previous one. I think we could have done a whole forum on understanding how to pick your therapist. Thank you, Dr. Edith, Gary, and Holly, for your time. We're going to take a 2-minute break, and we'll be back with your wellness session, workout session. See you guys soon. Hope everyone's enjoying today's sessions, but the day's not over yet. We have two more actually sessions to go. I wanted to introduce you to Chef Danny Davies, who will be doing some exercises that you can do while on board. Here you'll discover practical exercises that can be performed in limited space of a yacht to maintain physical fitness and mental well-being. This session will include demonstrations and tips for integrating regular physical activity in your daily routine.
Hello.
Hi, Danny. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you are on charter, you are on board right now, so we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, my yacht's just over there. I'm in the marina in Norman's Cay in the Bahamas. We got in yesterday.
We really appreciate it. I also know internet is not the easiest right now, so thank you again. Before we start with a few questions and then head into the workout session, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give just a brief intro.
Yeah, so I've been a chef for a lot of years. I did 10 years in the British Army as a chef, traveled all over, 5 tours of duty, Afghanistan, Iraq, all those kind of places. But I finished up my career the last year feeding Prince Harry and Prince William, which was a great honor and something I really enjoyed. I then got into teaching. I taught culinary arts for 7 years at a college in London, which was fantastic. Got to work with Michelin star chefs and loads of kids and getting them on to become chefs, which really led me on to creating the Future Chef Project, where I was helping chefs, kind of student chefs and junior chefs, become better chefs and get into the industry. Then went to Fiji for a while, became a dive master, which was pretty cool. Lived on an island in Auckland, just off Auckland in New Zealand. That was awesome. What else have I done? Then I moved to Florida and became a yacht chef. So I've been out in Florida about 7-8 years now, working on different sized boats. I've done really big ones from Motor Yacht Apu, which is huge, to the one I'm on now, which is probably the smallest one I've been on, a 100-foot boat. I've kind of got myself into the chef community because I love helping people. I get such a buzz from it. So I run a YouTube channel called Behind the Line with Chef Danny Davies. I work with Triton magazine to do that. And I also write in their magazine every month. I do a page called Keeping It Fresh. We also host Saturday Brunch, which is once a month down at Culinary Convenience in Fort Lauderdale, where yacht chefs and other chefs drop in, cook some scrambled eggs. We do the scrambled egg challenge and just catch up with them, find out how their season's been, what they've been doing, which is always fun. And we post those on the YouTube channel. Also have my Instagram, which I'm probably the most famous for, posting pictures of my food and the places I travel to, kind of doing a lot more with that now and trying to make it, monetize it and make some money from it. But I love being part of the yacht chef community and part of the yachting world. It's a great job. We get to go all around the world and do some amazing things, but it is high pressure. And that's kind of why I want to talk to you today and give you some of my my advice and information that I've learned through my years in the British Army and doing stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that intro, Danny. I think I know many people know you because you do a lot of content creation and you are really an influencer in the chef community. But I don't think a lot of people know, or the ones that had even saw you, that you were in the forum, that you were such an advocate for physical fitness, and then you use that to help with your mental health. But before I give anything away, I wanted to know your thoughts and how do you see your physical exercising impacting your mental health, and how have you found that to help with your long journey on board? Yeah,
well, it all kind of starts in the military, kind of like the military mindset. We start each day with like a 5K run, so like a 30-minute run. As a big group, a squad of soldiers, we run around. And I didn't really think about it back then. I guess I was a lot younger. But when we'd finish and we'd start our work day, I just had a good feeling. I think they call it runner's high. I used to work out at the gym. I used to box a little and play basketball. I also played volleyball. So I was very active in the army for 10 years. And then I got out and started teaching and kind of got a little bit fat and lazy, really. Just going through the grind of the day, trying to get it through to the end of the week and then getting couple of jars in at the weekends and, you know, having fun, but never really thought about my mental health or my physical health. Then started yachting, and I was probably a little bit overweight, and I got really depressed on the first few boats that I worked on. I've got a family, wife and 2 kids, live in Boca in Florida, and I get really homesick and really miss them. And I felt really isolated as the chef, which sounds strange because as part of a crew, you're, you know, one of the main players really as the chef, but not a lot of people spend time with you. They're either only there because they're the stewardesses and they're working, or it's the engineers come to fix something. The deckhands would just say, hi, thanks for the meal. And I just became really lonely and didn't really know what to do. I had a bit of a community going on. I had a couple of WhatsApp groups that I was in and Facebook groups. And a friend of mine, Mariah Tish, she's a yacht chef and she's an ultra marathon runner. And I would see posts from her where she'd be doing these huge, like 20-mile runs, 30-mile runs. I mean, she does 50-mile and 100-mile runs now. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? I'm gonna start running. And after 2 or 3 days of doing that in the morning, getting up early, going for a run, like just 10, 20 minutes out running, I felt so much better about myself. And I thought, hang on, there's something to this. And so I started looking into it, investigating it. I learned a lot about food and diet and how that can improve your mental health. But I find now, and I'm big advocate for it, I want to tell everyone about it, is doing a bit of exercise, 20, 30 minutes, just gives you so much more energy and so much more appreciation for life. And I think, you know, that gives you, it makes the problems that seem huge on a boat become small again and manageable. And I want to talk to you all about it and tell you all about it.
I actually do a bit of running myself. Not a marathon runner or anything. We're talking about less than
No, me neither.
5 kilometers. But yeah, it definitely doesn't matter how slow you go. It does make you feel better about yourself. And personally, every time I have to go on stage or I have to perform in a place that I'm uncomfortable outside of my comfort zone, basically, I actually go running because it does help me bridge that anxiety gap and get me in a state to perform and give more. So I'm with you. I also use exercise, but let's continue talking about you. And I know you have developed like a 4-day workout on board series. Can you tell us a little about what was your mindset behind that?
So I wanted to be able to contribute to this forum a bit more than I can because I'm on charter and it's getting close to lunchtime. I've got guests on the boat now. They're all sunbathing on the top deck there. So, but I wanted to give more than what I can just give in, 10, 15 minutes with you guys and talk about it. So I developed a really easy routine. I did 4 days. I kind of think 4 days is good because you can kind of go 4 days straight or break them up, do a day and then take a day off and do a day, take a day off. And that completes the week. And I wanted to do them where you can do it in the cabin, you can do it in the deck, you can do it in the galley, like using a small space and very limited equipment. I think I just use a dumbbell in these routines. And so I was on a cruise ship going from London to Norway when you spoke to me about doing this. And so I went into the gym there. So the first one I think is on board. And then the second ones I did at my local gym, Johnny O's in Boca Raton. And it was just great to be there and be doing it. And then the other gym guys coming up and saying, what are you doing, chef? And I was like, well, I'm trying to do a routine where we kind of don't use much space and there's not much floor space. And, it's been really interesting. And how fat I was hiding. There's a little plane going over the top, a little seaplane. It's lovely here, eh? I went for a run this morning as well. It gets rid of that anxiety, doesn't it? That extra kind of energy that I have is kind of calmed down and I'm ready to talk to you and express my feelings well. But the motivation behind this was to give something back to you guys and back to the rest of the yacht crew. I put it onto my YouTube channel and I set a premiere. So that should be released now. I think there's 4 videos on there you can go and have a look at. And we'll put some links below, right?
Yes, you guys will have access, of course, to this routine, so you can continue doing them while on board and definitely off board as well. But like I said, we will have a preview because he did share a video that we will be uploading after this. So don't worry, you don't have to go away to the links yet.
No, stay here.
I've
got more to say.
So, Chef Danny, you were also mentioning that you also did some research when it came to food and seeing how it actually affects also your mental health. I know we were talking only about exercise, but from your that is also your specialty. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you use food, or how have you integrated that to continue with mental health balance?
Yeah, sure. So I worked for a client that was into triathlons. He had a lot of money and a lot of resources. So we had a personal trainer and a nutritionist, and I worked with them. And we'd do his blood work every couple of weeks, which was a bit extreme, but this is how we like to do business. And we looked at where he was deficient, what kind of macros, what kind of small nutrients that he wasn't getting that would help his performance. And I really got deep into it and started implementing that into my life. And so what we found is the nutritionist would be saying, well, he needs carbs and he needs magnesium and he needs this and this and this. And the personal trainer was saying he needs more energy, so he needs more carbs and he needs more protein. And I was taking that information and then saying, okay, so what's got the most protein? What's the most nutrient-dense food that I can feed him? And the client was actually pescatarian, hardly touch meat at all, have a little bit of salami every now and again, but very, very limited amounts of animal protein. A lot of fish, he liked fish, but his mercury levels were coming up. So it was kind of like, how do I work this and make my food taste delicious, look delicious, and be really nutritious? I was a poet. And I started eating like this too. I developed a cookbook called Vegan Plus. And the idea behind that is that you start off with the plants, because the plants have the most nutrients that we need for our bodies. So they have all of the small things, the vitamin Bs and the vitamin Cs and all those kind of things that you don't really get from meat or from fish. So I based my menus and my dishes on plants and then added a protein source, but tried to, because obviously in yachting, I tried to keep it very high quality. So like Wagyu steaks, very high quality scallops and caviar, lobster and things like that. And it really took off. I've started eating like that. I've been eating like that for about 2-3 years now. I found that I lost weight initially and I've kind of put it on now. But I feel so much healthier. I'm kind of tighter, if you like. I'm not as flabby as I was. And I have so much more energy during the day. I don't get these lulls. And I think that's what I want to express to you about what I've seen on yachts. Now, I want to be a little bit stereotypical about crew, which I'm sorry if I upset anybody. But a lot of times you'll start the season and you'll get the deckhands that will be like, right, I'm going to work out loads. So, chef, I want loads of protein. I want a big bowl of pasta every night so I can carb up, and then loads of protein in the day. And then you get the stewardesses, and again, sorry if I offend anybody, they'll be like, I'm going on a diet, so I only want to have brown rice crackers and avocado, and that's all I'm going to eat. And I think this is a really bad way to kind of start your season, or to kind of think about going into doing some hard work, charter or private. Because what you're doing is you're restricting what you're eating. You're saying, I'm only going to do this. And unfortunately, because we're humans, we like to reward ourselves. So if we're good at eating clean, if you like, for 2-3 days, we'll then go and splurge and have a chocolate cake or a big greasy burger or something. I think the trick to it is to kind of balance your blood sugars through the day. So start off your day with some fruit or some yogurt or something that's going to give you a bit of energy but not fill you up. And then try again, have something again around 10:30. Again, not too sweet, not too sugary. Stay away from the sodas, they're bad news. And have a light lunch. Eat again around 3 o'clock, but again, something really light, just a piece of fruit or something like that, just to bring those blood sugars back up again. And then a good dinner. Try and avoid alcohol if you can. It gives you a lot clearer head in the morning and kind of helps you stay motivated to do more work. There's nothing worse than trying to work out with a hangover or push through a charter season with a hangover every day. Blood sugar is really important because it affects our mood and the kind of happy hormones that we have, the dopamine and serotonin. So when we get hungry, our body sends our gut sends signals to our brain to say we're hungry, and we have a natural instinct to our aggression level to step up. Kind of an old, ancient trait, if you like, to go out and hunt food. So that's where hangry comes from. And I've seen so many charter seasons start, and 2-3 days in, where the stews are eating a cracker and the deckhands are just eating meat. It gets to like 11-12 o'clock just before lunch, and everyone just gets a bit crabby and a bit irritable with each other. Then they sit down, they have dinner, everything's fine again. And then around 4, 5, again, this kind of crabbiness, this kind of anxiousness and awkward aggression kind of starts up again until the food comes, and everyone's happy again. And because I'm the chef, and because I kind of stepped back from the crew eating together, I kind of see this a lot. And I think it's really important to not restrict yourself on what you're going to eat. Just be careful that you're not drinking loads of sodas, eating lots of chocolates, and snacking. Midnight snacking is bad, kids.
Well, as you said before, since you started and you changed not only your exercise routine, but also your diet, you now feel more energy. And we know that when we are depressed, we have very little energy. So it becomes more of this cycle. So there are definitely stuff that we can do to our bodies, from, the exercise that gives us that running high and the endorphins, and also giving it the right nutrition, that we're not tricking ourselves, because there's definitely something that we have to deal when it comes to mental health with our brain, but also like push us into the right direction. Because if we're also like going through depression on board, and then we're also eating stuff that makes us sluggish, sleepish, and even having less energy, it just all comes together. So I wanted to ask you, that's easier said than done. Obviously, in the previous session, I think Holly mentioned, when you are on board, your time is not your own. Crew really is, they just really can't control everything of their lives, because they have clients, like you said. The moment the people that are sunbathing, you have to go back and be there for them. So can you provide some practical tips on maintaining a balanced diet while on charter, especially when under stress or limited resources?
Yeah. So obviously the chef's going to cook for you, hopefully, if it's a good one. I would try and kind of stick to those meals and try not to snack too much in between. But I think definitely eating smaller amounts more often is better than having 2 or 3 big meals in the day, because of this kind of hanger thing, where the expectation of food kind of rises up as you get close to that meal time, and your sugar levels drop, so you feel more hungry and you get a little bit more aggressive. That usually happens with big meals. If you're eating smaller portions of food throughout the day, that your blood sugar levels stay more balanced, and you avoid that kind of sluggish mood, that kind of aggression kind of kicks in. That kind of negates that. Now, it is hard on a boat, but there should be always fruit available. Every boat I've been on, there's a fruit bowl in the crew mess. That's a really good go-to. Again, avoid sodas, avoid anything that spikes your sugar. So like chocolates and sweet things.
So we're thinking sugar right now. We're thinking not only like we're thinking right now, like when we're identifying food, sometimes when people are starting this healthy journey, they don't really, if you put a lot of items in front of them, they don't really know which one, even if they have the strength and the willpower, they don't know which one's best for them. So one of the key components that you were saying is food, and the other key component was being able to moderate the size of the meals and doing more meals at a day.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have lunch and you have, I don't know, a tuna salad niçoise that the chef makes, then maybe chop it in half. Eat half now, put half in a container, and then eat it when you've got a quick 5 minutes. I know it is hard on a boat, especially when you're on charter. Like you say, that your time isn't your own, and you've got to kind of do what the client wants and be available. But it isn't impossible. You do have a few minutes each day to kind of look after yourself and feed yourself. And splitting it out. And that's an easy way that I found, was to take my lunch or my dinner and just cut it into 2, save half for later on.
That's actually a great tip. I hadn't thought of that. It was like, especially when the chef's already making you food, just do yourself, just pack up part of it and then eat it later. Before we head into the workout session, I do have one more question I would love to ask is, what advice would you give someone that's new to integrating exercise into the daily routine? I know it's even more of a hurdle when you're on board, but yeah, again, when we were talking about food, it's like someone now has the willpower, they want to start, but they don't really have the tools or really have ever, like you've been in the British Army, had a routine in mind, had done this before. A lot of them are like just starting exercise for the first time now. So what advice would you give them?
Watch my videos. No, in the video, what I do is, especially the one that you're going to show, is I kind of explain it a bit more, but I'll talk about it now. It's about starting slow and not going too hard too soon. A lot of times when I've had a big break from working out, I'll go for a big run or I hit the gym hard, and the next day I feel really sore and I kind of lose the motivation to do it. Take it easy. You only really need 10 to 15 minutes of moving your body. But what I find on boats is they have low ceilings, so we never really raise our arms up. We never really take more than maybe 20 steps in one direction because the boat's small. So just getting off the boat and walking around the marina is a great start. If you can make that walk a little jog the next day, that's even better. And then build up. With the bodyweight routine, which is what I'm going to show you, is some squats in there, some marching on the spot. And this is about moving our big muscles to make the blood pump around. I say blood, but there's a bunch of lactic acids and things like that that's all around our system. And to start moving that around and getting it going, it's like the analogy I was given was like your body's like a car. If you leave it in the garage, it's going to get old and rusty and not really work very well. If you take it out for around the block every day, it's going to run, and you know it's going to run. And that's kind of what we're doing, is taking out around the block, just taking your body out, doing some star jumps, some burpees, or going for a little walk around the marina is a great start and a great way to kind of get your blood going, get the hormones getting released, get that dopamine effect for when you've finished, get a sweat on, get your heart rate up as well, and it'll make you feel a lot better. The analogy for a car is a good one for food as well. If you think of your body as a car and you're going to fill it with gas, you want to use the best quality gas that you can get. If you're going to put some crappy stuff in there with loads of bits of rubbish in, your car's not going to run very well. Our bodies aren't going to run very well. But if we put the premium, best quality fuel in, then we're going to run a lot better. Our brains are going to work better. We're going to be sharper. We're going to be faster. Yeah. We're going to be feel better about ourselves. Also, a thing about food is sharing it. I think it's really important. I find myself as a chef, I would eat in the galley because I didn't want to take a break or sit down with the crew or we're all eating my food, which I've just cooked. It always feels a bit weird doing that. So I would eat by myself. And that made me feel more lonely and more kind of separated from the crew. So I think it's important that if you get a chance, share your meal with someone, sit down, have a little chat and relax a little bit and have some food with somebody. I think that's a really important thing to do. And I try to do that a lot more now.
That's a great tip, and definitely one that at least they can, they have the tools, they have people there. They can definitely do immediately, the people that are on board, to make sure that they don't isolate themselves even more. There's two questions that we have that come in, and then we have to go into the workout session. So what do you do if the owner, guest, or your client wants to eat really unhealthy food and you're just around that constantly? What advice do you have?
That's a tough one, right? It's for me, I kind of try and stay away from processed food, and that's the only advice I can really give to that one. If the clients want to have really unhealthy food and that's all the chef has on board and that's what he's cooking, it's tough. Maybe just suffer for that week and then get back onto the fresh veggies. Lots of green veggies. That's the way to combat processed food. Green veggies are packed with nutrients, packed with iron. I see stews that have got bruises all over their legs and things, and that's usually because there's a deficiency in iron. So green veggies are the answer to processed food. Get more green veggies in you.
That's a great tip. And the last one, it's more of a comment. Great from Eva. Great advice. Thanks so much for sharing, except for the snacking. Didn't want to hear that was not healthy. So, Danny,
snack on something healthy. Have a carrot. Have some carrots and apples and bananas. Just don't go for a packet. Basically, if you have to open a packet to get to the food, it's not good. It should be in its natural form.
Well, yesterday my breakfast while being on the forum here and not leaving the laptop was a pack of cookies. So yes, anything that comes in a wrap, then you have to don't do it. Danny, thank you so much for your time. As he mentioned before, this is a preview. He also has uploaded some videos for us for you to enjoy and start working out in a 4-day routine. And have a wonderful day. We will be in touch soon.
Thanks very much. Enjoy the videos. Check out my Instagram, Future Chef Project, and my YouTube channel, Behind the Line with Chef Danny Davies. It's a pleasure speaking to you, Andrea.
Bye.
Chef Danny Davies here. I'm going to show you some of my bodyweight routines that I use during trips to keep my mental health straight. Now, I'm in the gym here. I've got lots of space. Usually on a super yacht, there isn't that much space, so I'm not going to be jumping around and moving around too much. We're trying to keep everything nice and tidy, so you can do it in the galley, on the bridge, in your cabin, keeping out of the way. Obviously, when we're on charter, we've got guests and we don't want to see the crew working out. So this is a little routines to help the blood flow, keep you going, and hopefully keep your mental health on point. It can be really hard on a boat to work out. Space, time, all that kind of stuff. So this is a really simple routine that allows you to move your body, get the blood flowing, and just kind of off that negative energy. So I like to start off with working my whole body. So I'm going to do some burpees. So really simple, we're going to go down, legs out, and up. Next is some stepping forward lunges. The knee wants to go almost to the ground. I'm use alternative legs. I've got my hands together in the middle to kind of get my balance. It's pretty hard to do this underway. I found if I can hold on to something, it just helps me keep that balance. So we're going to do 10 each leg, pushing up through the heel of the foot on the leg that's extended. Really feel that burn in those quads. The quads are the biggest muscle on the body, and this really gets the blood pumping through. So 10 each leg, 2 more. Come on, chef, let's go. Next is just a push-up. There's 2 techniques to do it. The first one is with my legs extended. If you can't really do this, you put the knees down. And we're gonna do 10. Arms should be just over shoulder width apart, and we're going to go down, chest to the floor, and up again. 10 of these. This is a little squat. I like to put my hands together, feet just about shoulder width apart. We're going to bend down, keeping our back straight, sticking our butts out, and coming up. I'll show you from the side. We're going to do 10 to 12 of these. Trying to keep your knees in, don't let them flare out to the sides. Again, I've just got my hands in the middle, keep the balance. If I was underway, I would hold on to something. Do 2 more. Next is a sit-up. So I just got myself a mat, you could use a towel. We're going to just slightly bend the legs, put our arms over our chest, up, and do 10 to 12 of these, and start the routine again. So that's the routine, very simple bodyweight routine with a few exercises. What I like to do is each exercise one after the other, then take a 30-second to 1 minute rest, and then start again. I'll repeat each one 3 times before taking it easy, relaxing, bringing my breath down, cooling down again, and I'll do a little stretch. Consistency is key. It's not easy to work out every day, especially when you're on charter, but doing it every other day or every 3rd day really helps bring up that positive mental attitude. After a workout, your body flushes with endorphins and you have that feel-good factor. One of the things I found is if I don't work out, I feel muggy, I feel down, I'm frustrated. So getting in the gym, doing a little routine, helps boost up my energy levels and makes me feel so much better. Remember, consistency is key, so get out there and do something.
I hope you guys got energized and worked out a little bit. I do highly recommend personally to include exercise in your routine. It just definitely helped me feel better, and I will do those exercises. And if you want, film yourself doing the routines and send them back, and we'll happily post them in a little feedback video. So we're going to take that last 2-minute break, and then we're going to come back with some meditation sounds. So I will see you back soon. Hi everyone, welcome back. So this is now our last session. It's a meditation thanks to Experiential Yachting. They have sent us a preview of their sound for guest satisfaction and extra gratitudes. So we're gonna listen into it's a 9-minute meditation track, but we're gonna listen to a preview of 2 minutes. They have also graciously giving us an additional 30% discount for anyone listening in. Those interested, let me know and we will send the coupon along. So enjoy.
Now you are at the aft deck, and you continue walking down to the beach platform. You can hear the calm waves lapping against the yacht. You want to keep going, but you are surrounded by the sea. But your imagination has no limits. You are the master of your thoughts. You are the master of yourself. You can do whatever you want and however you want. And if you have the desire to keep going and walk on the sea, you can simply do it by the power of your imagination. So you step out of the yacht and continue walking on the calm sea, trying to keep your balance.
all for joining us for Yachting International Radio's two-day Mental Health Forum. It's been great having you with us as we dove into some of the most important mental health topics in yachting. Your participation and engagement have made this event truly special. If you couldn't make it live, no worries. You can still watch all the sessions on demand. Just make sure you registered to receive the recording link. To register, head to our events page on our website at www.yachtinginternationalradio.com.
We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Details can be found on our website, but we'll be giving you a sneak preview of what it's all about.
What is our next one, Andrea?
Well, it's about eco-yachting for crews. So we were thinking not only is this a very important topic, but yacht crew haven't been giving these conferences that are educational, same as the forum we just did. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to embark on this very important topic.
Well, and I think too, with Yachting International Radio, we are probably one of the only forms of yachting media that really put it out there. It is factually based. We make sure that we have professionals on board. We make sure that every side of every topic is allowed to have a voice. And I think that's so important because a lot of these issues that we do raise and a lot of the forums that we are going to have can be contentious, to be absolutely honest. And I think it's important that we all have that platform to be able to really get down to what's important underneath all the layers of fluff, as it were.
Yeah, and there's many layers to, of course, sustainability and eco-friendly solutions for yachting. And we know that this is an extremely important topic for yacht crew because they're the ones that are out at sea and see it firsthand, how we are affecting the oceans. So without further ado, please see in the descriptions our email if you have any suggestions for sessions or who should be a speaker, who should be involved. We're more than open to any ideas. You can always DM us as well because we're in tons of social media platforms.
Well, and any forums that anybody thinks is really, really important that we should sort of address and talk about. Andrea and I can't come up with them all. And, we may know a fair few things, but we don't know everything, obviously.
So true. We're very approachable, so never be afraid. And to close out the event, we would love to thank our sponsors, especially our event sponsor, Superyacht Fitness, and our other supporting sponsors, iSwan, ATPI, The Crew Coach, Yachting, The Gap Counseling, Yachts, Mermaids, I Line Within, Yachting USA, Beat Library for providing us with original music for the forum, and Experiential Yachting for gifting our followers as supporters a discount under Mediation.
And YIR is all about our listeners. Once again, if there's a topic that you would like to create a forum on or a show around, we would love to hear from you. I also want to say thank you to all of our amazing speakers, for every single one of you for showing up yesterday and today. We do appreciate your time, and we hope that what we've done today and what our speakers have done today really resonate with you, and you can carry that forward into your yachting career and perhaps refer this to others that are just joining the industry. Remember to follow us on social media for the latest updates on our podcast shows. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.